Thank you for the introduction, Alan. As you said, my name's Paul Adams. I look after a number of operations for GKN Aerospace in the UK, and it seems kind of appropriate to come and talk to you today about partnerships. Not just obviously because of the R word that everyone's been talking about at the moment, but also today's my wedding anniversary. So hopefully I'll do something this afternoon. When I get back, you'll have to excuse me from dinner. I have a prior appointment. So I'm going to talk to you today about partnerships and the partnership between GKN and Olswang. I'm going to explain to you a little bit about how that came about and what benefits we delivered. But really the key message that I want you to take away is, for me, innovation is overrated. What you really need to be thinking about is, how do I imitate my way to success? And that in itself will help drive innovation. So, if we move forward, lawyers and engineers, well, on the face of it, very, very different. But in reality, there's actually a huge amount of similarity between what seems to be two very different professions. Both are absolute experts in their field, or need to be experts in that field, if you're using the right lawyers, hopefully. Hopefully we're experts in our field because we build wings for aircraft. And there is some other much deeper similarities as well. So typically both manufacturing companies and lawyers are relatively well organised from a personnel point of view. Manufacturing companies typically have a strong union presence. We certainly have a very strong Unite presence on site in Filton. But lawyers also get together and drive collective bargaining agreements with their employers, either through partnership arrangements or through other kind of collective agreements, if you like. So there is a number of similarities. But on the face of it, as I said, very, very different businesses and very different business models. So how do we drive improvements from working together? Well, this is the GKN Filton site. The majority of the white buildings you can see in front of you are manufacturing buildings, and this site has been around since 1910. So we have about 1,600 people employed across these different buildings, doing all sorts of different assembly work, manufacturing work, and supply chain management work. The history of the site goes back a long way. So this particular aircraft here, this absolutely beautiful aircraft, is a Bristol box kite. And this is actually one of the earliest production aircraft that was manufactured on the Filton site. This lovely aircraft is yours for a steal at £1,000 at the time in 1910, which is worth about £100,000 today. And for those of you who know a little bit about private aviation, and I'm sure you've all got your jets in the car park, that's a real bargain. Today you'd be looking at about 50–60 million pounds for a private jet. So £100,000, granted the material's a little bit cheaper than what we make them for these days, £100,000, a great deal. But as you can see, real heritage across the site. Well, there's one or two around, in the Bristol Museum predominantly. This is a great example of what we produce today. This is the A380 trailing edge. This is the most complex and structural part of the wing of an aircraft. This large component here, which you can see in the front, actually supports the landing gear. So that holds the weight of the aircraft when it touches down. To give you a nice fact, and we were just discussing earlier about whether I'm an engineer or not, I'm absolutely not, and you'll tell this from this fact. That component there holds the weight roughly of 3 blue whales when the Airbus A380 touches the ground. So it gives you an idea for why it's so large and such an important part of the aircraft. You'll also be reassured to know that clearly we don't generally manufacture in the dark. This photo was shot for publicity purposes. That is a great example of the typical shop floor environment that we have in GKN. Contrast that then with Olswang LLC. Olswang, based in Holborn in London, beautiful shiny office here. They are a media law firm, so they specialise in providing advice to film companies, for example, other glamorous organisations. And I guess to sum up their credentials as a media law firm, this rather smug-looking chap here has just been up on their roof garden picking some asparagus. So they have a roof garden where they keep bees in the centre of London, and they, pop out during their lunch break and do a bit of weeding, watering, whatever is required. But as you can see, you couldn't draw a more stark contrast between a central London law firm and GKN Aerospace. So, how did it all happen? Well, we were looking very much to drive our non-manufacturing processes and looking at how we could understand better our indirect processes, if you like. And Olswang, on the other hand, have been trying to understand how they can productionize what they do. Most of what Olswang produce today are bespoke products for clients. However, there is clearly a lot of commonality in the kind of things they produce. And essentially what we set up between the two companies was an exchange program. So we sent people from GKN to the Olswang offices in London to understand more about their business processes, about their best practices. And some of the Olswang guys came to Filton to understand how we manufacture, how we plan for manufacture, how we design for manufacture, and most importantly, how we improve our manufacturing and supply chain processes. This led to then a number of follow-up sessions whereby the two companies exchanged experts, if you like. So some of our guys visited the London offices. They went and helped them redesign their physical processes within their offices, and I'll share a little bit more about that in a second, and advise them on how to take waste out of physical processes. Conversely, Olswang came to GKN and helped us understand the value of some of our indirect processes and the value of different staffing levels. Clearly, lawyers are very good at understanding charge rates, and we all have an effective charge rate to our business, but also understand exactly which processes are most key to our business and how we could improve them. So let me give you an example and talk a little bit more about detail about what GKN got out of this. So we asked them to come and support us with our HR processes. They are real experts because they need absolute specialist lawyers in the particular areas in which they operate. So they have a very, very slick HR process for identifying talent, for recruiting that talent, but doing it in a cost-focused way. We, on the other hand, have a very general recruiting process that goes out and tries to catch lots of different people and attract them into our organisation. For anything from a very skilled fitting role right the way to an unskilled labourer, if you like. And we were treating all of those people in exactly the same way. What we did with Olswang's help was we allocated a charging rate to everyone within our HR process, our recruitment process, if you like. And what we found when we did that was that the majority of time spent, elapsed time on the process, if you like, was being carried by relatively senior people with relatively high charge rates, rather than some of the administrative staff that we employ to make sure we manage our processes effectively. And it's not until really you lay it out, you apply facts and figures and data, that you can actually analyse improvements around a process. And we do this all the time on the shop floor. We look at lead time, we look at elapsed time, we look at cost to procure, but we rarely do it for our business processes. So this gave us a great way to provide some data, to add some data to our business process analysis. This flow chart that you can see on the screen in front of you represents what we ended up with, and the green boxes represent members of our admin team, if you like. So we effectively pushed a huge amount of work down through the organisation. The blue boxes are the actual line managers themselves, so we managed to extract line managers from the recruitment process almost entirely, except for the decision-making elements. And we managed to, overall, reduce our lead time to recruit by 75%. Now, that's a nice figure to put up on the board, but actually, what did that mean for us? It meant two key things. One, it's meant we've been able to attract talent much, much more efficiently. So many of you, all of you will have applied for a job at some point, and you will have been either delighted or disappointed in the response you get from the company who recruited you in terms of their expediency in coming back to you. It used to take us upwards of a week to 2 weeks often to get back to people with feedback after interviews and things like that, just because we're giving the jobs to managers who frankly have got much many busy things to do. They're very busy people and much more to occupy their time. We now get back to candidates. We have a target time, and within 6 hours of an interview, we give them some kind of feedback and guidance as to whether or not we'd like to take them forward within the process. Olswang hit 2 hours. So within 2 hours of you walking out the door from an interview, you will have a phone call from someone in Olswang saying either yes, we'd like to take you forward, or no, we wouldn't, and here are some of the reasons. And we've seen that's made a noticeable difference for us in our recruitment process. Secondly, and really importantly, and why this picture is at the top here, is it's actually allowed us to secure new business. So we have within GKN the Centre of Excellence for 3D printing from titanium within the Filton site. And we've typically struggled to recruit people with experience in that area because it's a very new area, it's a hugely growing area, and there's a massive demand for talent. We were approached by a customer of ours to produce some parts for them on a very, very short lead time. And initially, when we looked at it, we just couldn't support the contract because we physically didn't have the personnel to do it, and were therefore reluctant, I guess, to move forward. Through this process, we managed to not only bring people in very, very quickly, but also bring the right people in quickly to deliver a great result for that customer. That has secured us a contract in the region of £25 million over a 5-year period, effectively through this recruitment process and through the improvements we made from the process. So real tangible benefits from a business process improvement, and you could apply that logic to any kind of business process. What was in it for Olswang? Well, Olswang entirely redesigned their office layout, mimicking one of our shop floor areas, and we went and helped them do this. We had great fun doing it with them. So you can see from the flow here, we put in effectively single piece flow, and this is the production of legal documents up to these stations at the top here, which is where some of their partners sit who would ultimately sign off those documents. So we put in a proper factory floor process, if you like, through their office areas. We put visual boards, so what you can't see because this photo was taken before that, there's visual boards at the top of the office here, so they've got exactly the same measures and metrics that we use to monitor the shop floor, and they have got the right people in the right place, if you like, to see when they get problems in the process. So visualization, I don't need to preach to you guys about, is key to flow through a business. And what was happening in their business was that they were unable to see when they had problems in their process, were unable to see where they had bottlenecks, and unable to fix those bottlenecks because they couldn't see them. What this allowed us to do was put some really simple lean methodology into their office area so they can see where things are getting blocked up. As it said there, took profitability in that department up by 20%. And that is literally because they could produce effectively 20% more through that department as a result of these changes. So applying shop floor thinking to an office area. So rather than just me give you my example, I thought I'd also back this up with some facts and figures, just to prove to you that I haven't been making this up. So this is a study done by the Harvard Business Review, and they said that effectively there is an overwhelming amount of evidence to demonstrate that imitators actually overshadow the people they're imitating from a profitability point of view. And there's some great examples on the left here, some of them that you will not have heard of, but some of you will have done, like the Diners Club, for example, and they're more successful imitators on the right-hand side, so the likes of Apple, the likes of McDonald's, the likes of Visa and MasterCard. And that doesn't mean these companies are not innovative companies. That means they took something that worked or close to worked and made it better. And that's all this case study is about, looking outside of your industry and understanding how I can steal other people's ideas, legally of course, and apply them to my own business. The study then goes on to talk about effectively an information, imitation, innovation triangle. And this will start to ring some bells with you within your own business, because people often talk about best practice, but I suspect what you guys see when you work with your teams is people sharing best practice, applying some of that learning to their areas, that's the imitation part, but then making it better. And that's the key, the innovation part. Taking best practice, innovating with it, and taking it on to that next step. And what we've actually done now with Olswang is close that triangle. So we've added this leg here, if you like, whereby we've made that a repeat process. So we exchange people roughly every 6 months to talk about new things we've done in our business or new things they've done in their business that we think would be valuable to one another. And that for me is really why this is a valuable long-term relationship, because the better you get to know each other's business, the more helpful you can be to one another. We are absolutely looking to do this with other businesses in other areas, but we won't renege on that relationship with Olswang because it's delivering more and more value every time we make that connection. And just to close from my point of view then, this is absolutely nothing new. So although it's backed up by a Harvard study and some clever professors, this is what we've all been doing all our life. I'm very lucky to have a little 8-month-old boy, and I can see this happening already. Obviously not pretending to shave quite yet, he's not quite that coordinated, but he's learning by copying, and that's how we all learn. That's one of the most fundamental building blocks of human life, is copying to learn and sharing that learning, and that's how we've got to where we are as a human race, if you like. So that was everything that I wanted to talk to you about today.